Hi, I'm Laura,
Hi, I'm Deanne.
And I'm Philippe.
and welcome to our Lyman book club. We are reading Pawn and Frankincense by Dorothy Dunnett, and we are on chapters 4, 5, and 6. I will lead the discussion, but before we dive in, Dee and Philippe, any initial reactions that you want to share?
I mean, I think there's a pretty big elephant in the room we have to mention.
Yeah. So, yeah, I was unsurprised that Una died. Her death was so gruesome. Like, I mean, maybe not her death, but like the treatment of her body was so gruesome that. Ugh. But yeah, that I think it makes a lot of sense in the plot for this to happen. So, yeah.
It does, but there are still things that I would have liked to see. I would have liked to see how Una interacted with some of the characters that she has not interacted with yet. But I guess we'll never see these things unless we read fan fiction about them. So
True. Good
Yeah.
point. Yeah, I agree. She was such an interesting character that I would have liked to have seen her stick around. But I also feel like it ups the danger for the baby so much that she's not there. Like there was a slight sense of, even if she doesn't care about the baby, like she's sort of in the vicinity of the baby and maybe she can save the baby. And now that that's impossible and there's this little 1-year-old out there with no support whatsoever, like the stakes are really raised. So
yeah.
I feel that this kind of also is Dorothy Dunnett telling us, like, this is not Queen's Play anymore. This book is going to go very dark places, more so than you might have expected from the tone of some of the earlier books.
mm-hmm. Yeah, the treatment of Una's body was just like, whoa. I mean, we've gone into another level of, well, body horror, but also just dark. I mean, last book we had incest. This book we have mutilation of the dead. Like we're getting into, yeah. So
I feel that I'd be remiss in my feminist reading of media texts if I didn't point out that this is also the classic woman in refrigerators trope, where a woman dies in order to get a reaction out of a man, which is exactly what happens. Lyman kind of loses it, but we get why, because he's upset about Una's death. But it means her death is kind of about how he responds to it rather than about her as a character.
Yeah, but I sort of think that's true of her entire character. Like she was really, like we really see her through the lens of how Lyman sees her, and she's a catalyst, in so many ways. And yeah, so her death is just another catalyst of, yeah.
Within those boundaries, though, I did love her as a character, and I love that she's not soft and fluffy character, that she's so tough and hard, because that's kind of going against the trope.
Yeah.
She definitely grew on me from when she first showed up. I really didn't care for her too much in Queen's Play.
Yeah.
Till towards the end.
Yeah. I don't know if I ever liked her, but I like her as a character. Like as a reader, I think she's a really interesting character, and I enjoyed reading about her. I don't think I ever really warmed up to her as I don't know. She felt, in some ways, I think her character felt stubborn for the sake of being stubborn, as opposed to, I don't know. I mean, it was motivated. She was very strong, but she was a lot of fun to read and super interesting and all of that. So,
all right, should we dive in then? All right. So we start with chapter 4, Una. And this starts out with Lymond and Jarrett going into Algiers while the rest of the group stays behind on the boat. Salablanca goes back to his family. And basically, Lyman and his retinue are supposed to meet with the viceroy or governor But instead they're surprised that it's Salah Rais who greets them. And he's hostile to them because he fought them in Tripoli when they were allied with the Knights. But Lyman manages to get on his good side by offering him these guns that he's brought along. Yes. And then he sort of gives Lyman a connection with these people who supposedly have info on Una and the baby, although none of them actually do. And we get a reveal at the end of this section that Lyman has offered a fortune for Una and the baby. Thoughts on this?
Yeah. I mean, not only a fortune, every cent he has, which is apparently considerable.
So. Massive fortune, yes.
Yeah.
Was it 500,000 francs, I think?
No, ducats, 500,000 ducats in gold. Or however many, I don't remember the number, but it was in gold, whatever it was.
So one of the things I think is interesting as we look at the start in this chapter is we're in Jarrett's point of view thinking about Lymond, and Jarrett always kind of gives us this like traditional, masculine, conservative, patriarchal, conservative point of view on what's going on, which is that he thinks this is preposterous, this idea of Lymond, going to all these efforts for a mistress and a bastard child.
Yeah. And I underline that too. It's like Philippa's coming forced Lyman into an irritating and preposterous role. And so it's like Jarrett's like, not only has to do this dumb thing that he shouldn't have to do, but he's forced into it by this 15-year-old girl. And like you can just see Jarrett is so annoyed. And
well, of course, we get the reveal later that Lyman had offered his fortune before Philippa ever showed up, so it had nothing to do with her. He really wants to save Una and the baby.
Yeah, and Jarrett just can't imagine that, like, why, like, Jarrett's concept of morality does not extend as far as Lyman's. That his concept of morality sort of ends with that patriarchal traditional idea that you just said. And Lyman's doesn't, which is...
And I think it's important that we see this point of view, because if you look back on history, this is probably what would be the common point of view. And so it kind of explains, like, even in his own time, Lymond is an outlier.
For sure.
And it's just funny, but like still true in many ways of that kind of attitude. This whole idea that between this sort of personal vendetta where Lyman wants to murder Gabriel is a common thing, understood and respected. But the kind of maudlin susceptibility which can wring its hands all over Europe in the wake of an indifferent mistress and an unknown and unwanted infant was something other entirely. So like murder's vengeance is totally normal, but wanting to save a woman and a baby is really weird.
Well, it's also just indicative. It's like the power struggles between men are completely normalized. That two men would fight for dominance or whatever is normal and accepted in the way of the world. And yet to value women and children apart from their value to you as a man, because this child is a bastard child, this woman is his mistress, not connected by marriage or whatever, to value those people is an antithetical to society. So
yeah. And like the whole idea Jarrett has it, the only reason Lyman could be doing this is out of pride, because like Gabriel has them, so it's like the pride of getting them back from Gabriel. It all comes back to the men rather than like them having value in their own right as individuals.
Yeah.
We also get Jarrett's thoughts on Marta, which is he's noticing her eerie, uncanny resemblance to Lyman, but he's also like, they must have had a common ancestor generations ago.
Of course, right. That's completely what it is. Sure.
That happened. Right.
Denial.
And their physical resemblance is striking enough to be uncomfortable. So, yeah, and it is interesting that it says both his father and his grandfather had lived and fought all over France. So that gives us like two potential, either she's his half sister or his half aunt. Seems to be the implication here. And it would be super interesting to know when his grandfather died, which we have no information about that, right?
We might have gotten into the in an earlier book. I don't remember.
I have no recollection of knowing. I don't even remember like them mentioning his grandfather very much. So
he was definitely mentioned in Queen's Play, I think.
Yeah. Well, didn't the Dame de Dutance, doesn't she know his grandfather?
She knew him.
Yeah. So, but we don't know when his grandfather died. So it's an interesting thought. I don't know.
We also have, speaking of these mysteries, another line where it's Marta is trying to find out from Jarrett how old Lymond is, and he won't tell her.
Yes.
And this I found to be Dunnett teasing the audience because she knows how much we want to know at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I thought it was super funny because it was like Jarrett, who had not thought fit to tell her. It's like I know she wants to know, but I'm just not going to tell her.
And also, movie suggests that she's also more curious than she lets on about, what their connection is. Because if she doesn't know how old he is, she doesn't know what the relationship is like, or at least she wouldn't know for sure, like if they were twins or siblings or what.
Yeah. Does Lyman seem to be interested in figuring this out? Like, it doesn't seem like he's too concerned at this point. Like, I mean, maybe other things are occupying his mind.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think he's preoccupied with finding Una and the child.
It's not an emergency situation, I guess.
Well, I think also, so in the third chapter that we read, at the end of it, Lyman and Marta have this confrontation where he's trying to send her off, and she more than holds her own. She wins the argument, and one of the things she tells him is like, you can't remove the existence of me by ignoring me, basically. So he's basically just trying to like not think about it. Never happened. You don't exist. This is definitely not a thing. But like he's just in denial.
Yeah. You know what is interesting to me? I just had a thought. Okay, so if we sort of have an idea that Jarrett is in love with Lyman to some extent, which he seems to be, and there was some explicit mention actually in these chapters somewhere. It would be interesting to see what his romantic feelings, if any, are towards Marta, if she becomes a surrogate for Lyman in his eyes. Like,
I can see that happening. In fact, I think that Dunnett's already kind of setting it up.
Yeah, because like she would be sort of a socially acceptable version of Lyman that he could marry / fall in love with. So
I mean, he was completely flabbergasted. He was the first person of the group to actually meet Marta, and like dumbfounded by and struck at how much she looked like Lyman, to the point where clearly when they first met up with each other, he was just wanting to ignore the situation. He's like, oh, Yeah.
And she would be, I mean, if it's Lyman in a woman's body, like solves much problems for him. So maybe.
He's such a like traditional conservative kind of like attitude, but he also gets these like passionate obsessions with other men, and I can see it's hard for him to reconcile these things.
Yeah.
He's jumping ahead, but I love the discussion he has with Leone Strozzi later on in the boat.
Leone Strozzi has no qualms. He's like, this ship is full of a lot of men, and you're turning off the women, huh?
Right, you're getting rid of the women. Like, what are you guys up to over there? Yeah. It's true.
Yes. So anyway, jumping ahead, just kind of going in order. So we also have a lot of kind of I don't know how you describe it, but a lot of these descriptions of like this book kind of trails this like thin line of like sort of exoticizing the culture that it's in and not. And one of the things that I thought was interesting is there's this long description of how the Christian slaves are mistreated and like spat on in the street. This is 63. But then even Jarrett is thinking, but what nation gentled its conquered? Not the Christian world, not the Knights of St. John, which is the same theme that we had in the previous book, where it's kind of like, sure, you know, our enemies do terrible things when they capture us, but we do terrible things when we capture them. So actually, there's not that much difference between the Christian world and the Muslim world.
Yeah, just that Jarrett is actually thinking like, hey, maybe he's not romanticizing the Knights as much, which I thought was growth on his part. To back up, I wanted to look a little bit on 60, where the Lyman is doing this sort of political summary for everyone, and just like, hey, this is what we're going into. And it was just a nice little sort of glimpse of the way that his mind is thinking about all of these different factions that he's balancing against each other, and trying to play like all of these political, there's all these political factions that you have to think about when he's going into Algiers. And so telling everyone like, okay, this is how we have to behave. This is what we're, you know, we have to be one big happy party, and we must continue to look like one big happy party, or sugarcane to an onion, which, by the way, I like that phrase. Sugarcane to an onion, it'll be something about death for the lot of us. So he's just like, fake it that you like each other, because we cannot have any strife or we're going to be toast. And yeah, of course it didn't quite work, but.
I mean, definitely Lyman, like we said, I think we said this in Game of Kings, he's got plans within plans within plans. So like this whole thing with the guns he had in his back pocket, and it basically is what got them out of Algiers alive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what else is in the hold of that ship, I wonder?
Let's see. I sort of skipped ahead through this whole like meeting with Salaris. Any thoughts you guys wanted to share on it?
I was just looking at the different, I did like one little, you know, Dunnett always has these little tiny phrases that are just descriptive in a delightful way. One of those I found was on 63, where it talks about the ship in the harbor, and it calls it a lotus in a crocodile swamp. Which I just loved that. Yeah, so guns, politics, meeting the people. I think the next thing I commented on was when the Salaris shoots at him and he doesn't move.
Yep. Nerves of steel.
Nerves of steel. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he's basically just like playing these politics, and you know, Salaris wants these guns because these other guys are his potential enemies, and it gives him a leg up, so he's, you know, willing to negotiate. The next thing I noted was kind of after that combo finishes and we end up back with Jarrett and Lymond, and this is where Lymond reveals that he's, you know, put up all of his fortune long before Jarrett and Philippa showed up. And yeah, I mean, what does this tell us? He really, really wants that baby back, and he wants Una back.
Mm-hmm.
More than anything else, more than all his prospects, everything he could do with all his money.
Yeah, he's offered, as she says, it is all I do have. Yeah. So.
Any other comments on that section?
It's a fun, like, I think I've said this before, like this whole chapter and this upcoming chapter, like they're fun action sequences. You know, it reminded me, like the chase across the rooftop, you know, kind of reminded me of the chase in wherever that rooftop chase was.
Queen's Play.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yes, it was in Queen's Play, but I can't remember where they were.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
I'm not a huge action scene person, but I really enjoyed these. I thought it was a nice balance of sort of that political tension of the diplomatic sense of trying to get someone to do what you want, but also some action and fighting. But I don't have a lot to say other than it was a fun read. Yeah.
So in the next section, this man shows up and finds Lyman and Jarrett and gives them a note from Una. And then he tells them that she's at Dragout's house, and then takes them there, but then attacks them and runs away when Jarrett fights them. Inside, they search the place, and then they find Una's body in a kiosk in the gardens, where she has been flayed and her skin stuffed with straw.
Yeah.
That's the end of this chapter.
Right. And yeah, there was an interesting bit when the guy attacked them and Jarrett let him get away and he ran away and Lyman was mad and Jarrett's like, I apologize, I'll go after him now. And then Lyman says, there was a furious pause. Then Lyman's voice, the chill gone, said, don't be an ass, Jarrett. You know I can't do without you. It was an obvious answer, but it was also something Jarrett had never had from Lyman before, an apology and an appeal both at once, which I thought was interesting.
Well, and there's another bit that later happens between them in the next chapter. No, in this chapter. It's in this chapter, where Lyman tells Jarrett that he can't do it without him and don't let him drive him away. Like there's the most bonding explicitly between Lymond and Jarrett that we've ever gotten in these chapters, or in this chapter.
Yeah, it's like the most affirmation that Jarrett has ever had that he's important to Lyman, which...
Well, and the fact that Lyman's letting that slip through his kind of like veneer of not caring means like he's feeling it incredibly strongly. Like he starts to say it and stops himself, and then Jarrett's like, what were you gonna say? And then he's like, all right, I'm gonna say it, and then we're not gonna talk about it. But like he clearly, like he's in a really scary situation, you know, emotionally and like, you know, life-wise also, and like Jarrett is his friend and he really needs this friend to be there for him.
Yeah, and it's a nice little mirror, like a nice little bit of self-reflection on his part where he's well aware of his tendency to push people away. And so he's like, he doesn't say don't leave me, he says don't let me push you away. Which is right. I mean, he's definitely gonna do that. So
he's gonna try his hardest.
Right. Also, I really did love this sort of ratcheting up of tension through this garden, like exploring the house and looking at the garden, and they knew that they were trying to spring a trap. And so like this like, okay, we're gonna go a little further, we're gonna go a little further, we're gonna go a little further, and it's like, where's the trap? You know, like they're just waiting for like an ambush or something. And yeah,
scary. And even though it's like building up and you're like, oh no, something scary is gonna happen, when it finally does happen, it's like even worse than you thought would possibly happen.
Yeah.
But of course they were really in no danger until they at least found Una, because the way Gabriel works is he wouldn't have, you know, ended it for Lyman before making him suffer a little bit more.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
But they'd have no way of knowing that. Although Lyman suspected, I think, early on that he was going to find Una dead there.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because he doesn't know for sure. So it's sort of on 73. He's thinking about how, you know, either Gabriel's out here or Gabriel sent us out here for some purpose other than a simple ambush and killing, meaning like he set up a trap.
Mm-hmm.
Or unless there has been a mistake, a fault in his plans. But I can't believe that, though I'd like to. So he's got this part of him that's hoping that they've somehow got a step ahead of Gabriel, which of course then makes it worse when like, no, you're not a step ahead of Gabriel.
Not. Yeah. I do like the little, Lyman makes a little flippant comment about, he says, all right, you go get dead on that side of the garden and he says, you go get killed stone dead on that side of the garden and I'll stick to this. So it's like they're both just, okay, we're walking into an ambush. You go die over there and I'll die over here. And then we'll meet in the middle.
And, I mean, what else are you going to do?
Yeah. Yep.
I think it's also really telling in Lyman's words to Jarrett that even though we get really frustrated with Jarrett and we could see Jarrett, you know, storming off because of issues that Jarrett has, anger issues or whatnot, Lyman never blames Jarrett for anything. He always blames himself. So he starts it out by saying, you put up with a lot, you know, more than you should, more than other people can be expected to do. Mm-hmm. So he, like, to him, Jarrett is this like long-suffering friend who's putting up with him. I just think it's very sweet.
Yeah.
And then also funny that Jared says that Gabriel is unlikely to spend a large part of his time arranging esoteric disasters for his adversaries. Everybody keeps saying things like that, but no.
Like, I think he absolutely is spending large amounts of time and money and energy at arranging esoteric disasters. It's like the more drama he can create, the better.
Lyman really pissed him off.
Yeah.
Well, he's the only one that's ever foiled one of his plans. He's always sort of gotten what he's wanted. And like, you know, here's this stoolie, this lower than, you know, this worthless person in Gabriel's estimation, who completely figured out his plan and foiled him. It's like, that just doesn't happen in Gabriel's world.
I mean, I don't know if he saw Lyman. I don't think he saw Lyman as worthless, though. I think he saw Lyman as a potential protege / partner / minion.
Yes.
Like it was more like I wanted him and he thwarted me, you know.
But I think maybe worthless wasn't the right word. The word I'm trying to say is there was no even small part of Gabriel that thought anybody would ever figure him out.
Oh yeah.
So like in that estimation, you know, he didn't see Lyman for what he was worth, because he was like, doesn't matter, I'm going to use this guy and spit him out from my plans. No one's going to know the better of it.
Yeah, I definitely think that's true. This is like the one person who's ever resisted his seduction, basically. And to Dee's point, it's someone he really wanted to be like enslaved to him and doing whatever he wants. So he is like super pissed, and he's gonna spare nothing in getting his vengeance, which really sucks for Lyman.
Yeah, super sucks.
So another thing we have in this chapter is Una's note, or her letter, which is very different from the one she sent him on Malta, which was very abrupt. This one is a little bit more contemplative. And if we believe what we're told later, that she committed suicide, this actually is kind of a suicide note. I'm curious if you guys had any thoughts on this. She says stuff like, forget the child. Your life has been wasted enough. So she's still believing this like brainwashing from Gabriel. But she's also saying, the day set for our meeting is coming. I'm glad, for I have been very tired, which kind of, if you read it as a suicide note, it's like she's glad that her life is ending. And she says she regrets nothing.
I mean, she definitely wrote the letter. I just don't know if I see it as a suicide. I don't know if that was she's such a strong-willed person that we've seen before. And sure, she spent almost a year now in captivity with her child, and, you know, it's a child she didn't really want, and we've seen her interaction with that. But I still don't know if she would get to the point where she would even think about that.
I mean, I think she committed suicide. I mean, if the note is genuine, and it seems to be, because we get like Lyman sort of confirms that it's the same handwriting, obviously she could have been coerced to write it, I guess. But it does seem, I mean, even things like just ellipsis on sentences, where the sentences kind of trail off. It's not direct. It's not like a concise, direct note, like Laura was saying. In the end, that last sentence, I regret nothing save for that fool of a man. I'm assuming she's talking about the governor of Gozo.
Oh, I was thinking Cormac, but could be either one.
Oh, yeah, it could be Cormac.
You're right, it could be the governor.
Yeah. I regret nothing save for that fool of a man, and anyway, what good do regrets do? And that just reads to me like a suicide note, or an I've given up note. So
in Disorderly Nights, wasn't there a sequence where she tried to kill the baby and herself? So it's definitely not outside the bounds of her personality. I think someone as proud as her, having been in captivity for so long, would do anything to escape.
I guess it just seems very convenient to me that she literally died the day that Lyman showed up. unless she had foreknowledge of him coming, unless she knew specifically that he was there.
I mean, it says the day set for our meeting is coming.
Yeah, she does, because I guess
Okay.
they can tell her
Yeah,
he's coming, and then they have her write the note to him, so she knows he's coming.
right.
And
She
you
might-
can also see that she thinks that he's like going to waste his life for her, so he's coming, so she's going to kill herself so he doesn't waste his life. And she even says, like, the baby's going to die, like, don't waste your life.
Yeah. So my guess on the sequence is that they told her he was coming. They made her write a note to him. She writes the note to him, sends it off with the guy, kills herself. Like,
She also, I think, is smart enough to realize that her life was in danger anyway. So maybe she did that in order to forestall actually getting murdered. Because I think whether she killed herself or was murdered, that was always the plan. She was going to be found by Lymond dead. So,
and she eliminated herself as leverage against him, which if her focus at this point is for him not to waste his life, you could see, and people under extreme trauma don't make the best decisions, so like so much trauma and torture and stress, like she can make decisions that she wouldn't have made 3 years before, so.
yeah. Well, that makes a little more sense to me now.
It does make you wonder, what the plan was if she hadn't killed herself. Would they have just come and killed her anyway?
I think the plan was probably exactly the same. They just would have flayed her alive instead of dead. That's my guess. So basically, she saved herself from a whole lot of torture.
No.
I don't know.
So yeah, as you were saying, we also have this kind of amazing buildup of tension as they search through the house and the gardens, and these really incredible, vivid descriptions of these, beautiful but kind of like abandoned formal gardens, because Dragout's household isn't there right now. Of course, then leading up to this beautiful kiosk and beautiful Una, who's not beautiful anymore. It's so sad.
So I love the practicality of, like, when the household moves, they don't lock anything up, and it's all open and you can wander through it because there's nothing to steal. It's like it just seems like uber practical. You just take your expensive things with you wherever you go, and then set up in the new place, and then the old place, like, you don't care who's in there because there's
the money to hire a bunch of servants to take all your stuff.
I guess
probably slaves at this point, but yeah, just take all your stuff with you when you travel.
Yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, the payoff for all that tension was just horrifying.
Here's another question I wasn't clear on, and maybe it's answered in the next chapter, so maybe it's a discussion for the next chapter. But what is Dragout complicit in this? What was his sort of involvement in this plot, if any?
Oh, that's a good question. I assumed not.
That's what I'm assuming.
But I'm not sure why I'm assuming that.
Yeah, because you get the feeling, since he and Lyman have this past relationship and they have that excellent sort of discussion in the garden in the last book,
right,
he would be on not necessarily Lyman's side, but he knows that this woman's important to him. So
right, I assumed that she was actually sold without his knowledge.
Yeah,
that all of that happened without his knowledge.
So like he and his family and his harem and I guess Guzelle sort of went off and left Una as part of the household, and then she was sold by like maybe one of the third wives or something. That same woman that was nasty to her in the last book. Well, it wasn't nasty to her, but she's the one that branded.
Although probably not that one, because that one was turned out by Dragout afterward, which does tell us that Dragout doesn't want these bad things to happen to completely.
Yeah.
So you get the sense this is like all set up by Gabriel and maneuvering around him, and he probably doesn't know.
Right, which makes me really curious to think if Gabriel becomes an overt enemy to Dragout, which interfering with his household seems, I can't imagine that Dragout is gonna be very happy about like about Gabriel interfering with his domain. So if Gabriel makes an explicit enemy of Dragut, is that going to help Lyman? Like, are they going to be, I don't know. But that would be interesting to see. It'll be interesting. I think one of the things I'm interested about in this book is to see like who lines up on Lyman's side and who lines up on Gabriel's side. And like, do we have this like push and pull between various, I mean, to go back to the chess metaphor, which we kind of left, but you know, like who's a pawn and who are the valuable pieces on each side and how do they get moved around the board? And so.
Well, yeah, keep in mind the title of the book, Pawn and Frankincense. So we haven't.
Oh yeah, that's right. We haven't left the chess metaphor. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So.
All right. So our next chapter, chapter 5, Algiers. We start out with, so the last chapter ended with Jarrett finding Una's body. So now Jarrett goes back to Lymond and tells him where to go. Lyman drapes his cloak over her and then sets the kiosk on fire so that her body burns with it. And then he goes off and Jarrett chases after him. Jarrett gets attacked by a group of men, which includes the messenger that took them there before. And they have this fight where he calls for Lyman and Lyman basically kills everyone except that messenger. And then takes him to this house, which turns out to be the house where Una had been kept as a slave. And it's an old man and these two women, and then this messenger who's part of the household. And he basically interrogates the guy who says that Una killed herself and that the baby was sold, and that Gabriel's the one responsible. And then he's like begging for his life and Lyman just kills him. And then they get chased by the Aga of Janissaries and Jarrett gets knocked out, which is where the section ends.
I love the moment where when after Lyman finds her body, Jarrett says, Francis, which, you know, how often does he call him Francis? And he says, Francis, if you want something done, let me do it. And just that, I mean, he doesn't know what to do in this moment. And yeah, just wants to help. And
well, it tells us part of why Lyman is so loyal to Jarrett and wants Jarrett around him, even though when we're looking at Jarrett, we're like, really, Jarrett? Mm-hmm. But Jarrett does have this good heart. And he is a friend who wants to help.
Yeah. Moments like this are redeeming him for me. So keep up these kinds.
There's just some like super beautiful descriptions in here, which I think is part of why the section is so powerful and so eerie. Like we have Jarrett leading Lyman to the kiosk, and it's described, the pond this time was not a vista but a panorama laid out before them, with the kiosk in profile on their left, faced with the sparkling garden, the pool, the splash of live water against the shadowy trees, and the mellow, innocent light from the tiny kiosk. Lyman stopped and Jarrett stood with him. It's very cinematic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, that just goes back to what we've discussed before, that you can tell Dunnett, you know, she's got the language of a painter, of an artist, so.
Yeah. She's always describing light so beautifully.
Yeah.
We also have some surprising sensitivity on Jarrett's part and perceptiveness on Jarrett's part. He has this thought of how Lyman had braced himself hard against death, and for the reality, he was quite unprepared. Mm-hmm. And through this whole section and the next chapter as well, we're getting this version of Lyman that's like super traumatized and super upset, and everything he does is unusual for Lyman. It's not our normal behavior that we would expect from him.
Yeah. I mean, on the topic of descriptions, I thought this one on 79 was just horrific, like really brought home the horror of this situation, in the sense of like a visual horror image, where Jarrett looks away from the fire and then he looks back. He says, only once as the whole pavilion caught and blazed like a jewel in the night, he looked back and saw the fur gone and the woman's body translucent as a beautiful lamp, eyes and mouth circles of fire in the hollow rind of the face. And it's because she's burning from the inside out, like because she's stuffed with straw, so there's a fire inside her skin and she's on fire from the inside. And that this idea that like this translucent beautiful lamp, but it's the body of this woman, and it's just
yeah,
horrible.
Super horrifying, super eerie. Dunnett is like at the top of her game as a writer at this point. But like, yeah, I was gonna highlight that one, and I was like, that's too horrible, I don't want to read it. So I'm glad you did instead of me.
It is horrible, but it is a really good example of just how evocative her language is and how she paints both beautiful pictures and juxtaposes these images that are so striking, but she's also able to paint these horrific pictures, which
and I mean, there's also all these gorgeous images of Lyman like being watched by Jarrett from a distance, going up to the kiosk, and being sort of backlit by the fire afterward. And this moment when he first sees her, like Jarrett, a moment's glance was all he could bear, and then he closed his hands over his face. So like, this is Lyman, who's not an expressive person at all, standing there, you know, with his hands over his face because he's so horrified and upset for this.
Yeah.
And then the fact that he puts his cloak over her to kind of give her a little bit of dignity in death, since she's also naked. Just so sad. And it, I think, reminds us also, I mean, the whole thing just reminds us of this depth of feeling that he had for her. Like, it's interesting because it's ambiguous, but like, he's probably not in love with her, but he also does seem to love her in a way where he's very like protective of her.
Mm-hmm. And I think he feels a strong sense of duty towards her as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think this whole thing goes back to Robin Stewart also. Like, I lured this person in and then I abandoned them and they died. So now it's like the same thing happened with Una. She would never have gone to Malta and been taken prisoner if he hadn't slept with her in order to get information. So he feels responsible for all of these things, and he doesn't want another Robin situation. So the worst thing that could possibly happen is she does the same thing as Robin and kills herself.
Yep.
So then we have this whole chase scene where Lyman is like lost it, and Jarrett's thinking Lyman forgot he's even there. And then he only comes back and helps him fight off the guys that are attacking him out of instincts.
I really kind of enjoy that Jarrett recognizes the parallel of this just chase scene to when he chased him to the beach in the last book. And he was like, oh, the last time I was chasing him like this, he was because of Una as well. However, if I hadn't caught him that time, we wouldn't be in this current predicament, possibly. And it's like, oh, okay, Jarrett, you understand. Growing.
Yeah.
Slowly but surely.
Jarrett wondered whether, coming fresh from her pyre, he was offering Francis Crawford yet another disservice or not. I guess that remains to be seen.
Yep. So then the description of Lyman helping to kill all these men who are attacking Jarrett is also like, Lyman has gone super intense and dark. It says the man who had carried out this piece of butchery, single-handed and scatheless, was a stranger to him, meaning to Jarrett.
This part really kind of shocked me a little bit, because I don't know if I could be completely misremembering things, but have we seen Lymond actually kill somebody like this before?
I don't think we've ever seen him kill a person who's not fighting back.
Yeah.
Right, because this guy, okay, he did play a role in Una's death, but he didn't kill her. He's the breadwinner of this household, so this old man and these two women are probably going to starve or have to become prostitutes or who knows what because of this guy dying. And Lyman just kills him in cold blood.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, I get his reasoning why, but like it still seems like this dark side of Lyman that has come out that, has been as of yet unwitnessed.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's a point where he says, so on 83, there's this bit where okay, he says, Jarrett says, before we go, if you mean to go through with this, Francis, for Christ's sake, there's no stopping. You better make up your mind now whether you can sustain it or not. No, said Lyman, let's just try it and see. He sounded not unfriendly and perfectly rational, except that Jarrett knew he could not trust from one second to the next what he would do. So you just get this sense that he's slipping, like that he's not. And there's a moment on the next page where it says, if it had occurred to him that there was another trap with a deadlier welcome awaiting him, he took no precautions. So like he's not thinking rationally at this point at all. And so I think that's definitely part of his killing of this man, is just that he's just living out of his emotions. As Marta talks about, like at the end of the next chapter, she explicitly, she calls him to task for doing that very thing. She's like, you can't respond. You're in the East, like you cannot respond with emotions. You have to think through this calmly, and clearly he's not doing that here.
Well, and it makes sense. Like he's just had this experience. He can't even say her name. There's this sentence at the top of 83 where he's taking Jarrett to this house where she'd been kept. And he says, I found out at Dragout's house where ... Like he can't even say like where Una had been taken. Like he's so upset. So I mean, all this extreme reaction is because he's in this massive turmoil of emotion.
Absolutely. And I mean, if we think about it, like if he had come out of this in the sort of the logical planning Lyman, we would think he was cold-blooded and that would be the horrific response. So
yeah, that's actually a really good point. Like this is actually showing us that despite that facade, he's not a machine. He's human and driven by human emotions, just like everybody else.
Yeah. And if he was in his sort of logical right mind, if you will, he probably would not have killed this man. But he wasn't. Like he's not responding from a place of thoughtfulness here. So
so we also get in this scene some of the hints of the life this child is living in this like dirty little house surrounded by drugs, and there's like the smell of different drugs in the air as they go in there, which is how do I say, it's a recurring motif that we get more and more of the further they go. What else? Oh, so then we get some info about what happened with the kid, which is the old man saying that someone came and bought the child. So this is what's going to send them on their next exploration.
A camel trader.
Yes, but the guy who, like, I guess arranged this, Shakib, was one of the people that Lyman killed. So Lyman's rash behavior has already bitten him on the ass because this person that could give him information is dead at his hand.
Mm-hmm.
Although that kind of turns out okay because Salamanca figures it out and tells him anyway. But yeah, and then we find out, like they'd say, like Dragout probably didn't know anything about this. It was the Archangel Gabriel.
Yeah, and we have this explicit on page 87. We have this explicit bit where Lyman is responding. Jarrett is having the same critiques that we're having of Lyman, where he says, and he says, in all these years with the order would not be denied. But Francis, again with the Francis, but Francis, you take these killings on your soul. And his answer was sharp and immediate. I shall act as I please, said Lyman, until I am satisfied. Meanwhile, I wonder if you were right. And then look out. So now they go into another chase. But this idea that like, I'm going to act as I please until I'm satisfied is just this anger, like speaking from the depths of his soul.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's interesting because we just had this moment of Lyman saying, like, you know, I need you, don't let me drive you away. And here Jarrett again is proving why Lyman does need him. Here he is being this conscience and this voice of reason and humanity, which is so not the role that Jarrett used to play. But he's right, like these men are only tools.
Right.
They're not the ones who actually set all this up.
Yeah. These aren't the actual enemy. Like, and yeah.
And I do think it's, I guess, telling Lyman doesn't ask for any info about the kid, and Jarrett thinks it's because he finds it too easy to kill, so he doesn't want to hear anything that's going to set him off against, I guess, the old man and the two ladies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Any other thoughts on this section?
I mean, I don't think Jarrett is right about why Lyman doesn't want to hear anything about the kids. I think every tidbit of information that Lyman gets about this boy just sort of cements him further into Lyman's heart. And like the more that he knows about who this boy is, the harder all of this is going to be. And so, and I don't think Jarrett's thinking that at all. Like Jarrett is not thinking about the fact that Lyman loves this boy, like sight unseen. And yeah, so.
That is true. So yeah, it's the men sent by the Aga of the Janissaries, because as we got this explanation earlier, like he's a rival with Salarais, I guess. So anyway, whatever. There's a chase. Jarrett gets knocked out, and then the next section starts with Jarrett waking up. So in this section, it turns out that Jarrett actually was knocked out by Salablanca and his men to keep him quiet because they were rescuing them from the Aga Janissaries men. They're taken to Salablanca's family home. Salablanca gives Lyman information on the camel trader that the baby was sold to, whose name is Ali Rashid, and gives him his route. They then return to the ship, and Salablanca decides to stay with Lymond instead of staying at home with his family. And Jarrett tells Marta and Philippa that Una and the baby died because Lyman has told him to get rid of the women, obviously, because Lyman has realized that, you know, Gabriel really does have all the time and inclination to make your life suck. So these women are in terrible danger with you and you need to get them away. Thoughts on this section?
I love the little bit where Salablanca is trying to comfort Lyman about Una, and he says, she is with God. One has said there is not any soul born, but its place in paradise or hell has been written. And then Lyman's response to that is, what we choose to do then is nothing, said Lyman. His face was not pleasant. I have taken far too long as it is to face the consequences of my actions. You must not unlearn me my lesson. I have several other tests still more acid to pass. And so again, we get that sense of like guilt that he feels over the choices that he's made, and that he feels that he's unredeemed, you know, and it's just sad.
I also feel he's kind of calling out, you know, we learned earlier in the book that he's going to learn 3 bitter lessons, and this is the first of them from the Dame de Dutance.
Yeah, it definitely shows us that Lymond has taken what the Dom said seriously in terms of these upcoming lessons, and then we're reminded of her creepy prophecy of shall we meet, and what she said was you will see her. Well, he saw her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's
So
also,
what exactly is the lesson that he learned in this?
what were the 3 lessons she said he was going to learn?
She just said they were going to be 3 bitter lessons. I don't think she said what they were. Did she?
She did.
I don't remember. I should have the prophecies like flagged with a Post-it, but I don't.
let's see, it was in the Lyon chapter, right?
Yeah.
I don't remember her calling out specific things, but I'm possibly wrong. So
Evil matters, so does love, so does pity. My pilgrim, you have still 3 bitter lessons to learn. I think it's evil, love, and pity.
Yeah, if evil matters, so does love, so does pity. So this was definitely evil, and it mattered. Like,
If this is evil, then we have love and pity coming.
I don't know. I mean, maybe the lesson here is that, like, don't underestimate the depths of evil. that
You can't underestimate, because the whole time they're like, surely Gabriel hasn't just set up this whole thing as an elaborate plot to get at Lyman. They were wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. I love Sal Blanca, by the way.
Oh, no.
He's a great character.
What do you love about him?
I just like that his when he says that he's gonna come, he says Lyman's like trying to say, like, your father needs you, has welcomed you home, you know, you should stay here. And he's like, it was he who broached that I should such a subject and join me to come. I have brothers. I have no wish to stay here other than for the term of your visit. He's like, Dad's got other sons. I'm gonna go with you. And it's just that, like, obviously I think his family's important to him. Like, we get little glimpses that he's very glad to be returned to his father and his family, but at the same time he's like loyal to Lyman, and I like that.
He's loyal, and obviously he recognizes Lyman is very competent, and Lyman's a really good person as a leader because he keeps saving Salablanca's life. So, you know, that's a good leader if your leader will go out of their way to save your life over and over.
Yeah. And you get the feeling that Salablanca is in a particular position to be useful in this adventure as they go. So
yeah, much more local knowledge, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, immediately he's useful. He's the one that helps them get back to the ship unmolested. So
yeah, he knows the street. Although I do love Lyman's answer to Salablanca saying, "I wish to make my fortune with you." And Lyman says, "Well, you can forget about that for a start. And if your place in paradise has been written, then for God's sake, hang on to it, because we're going in the opposite direction."
Yeah.
I mean, we're on our way to hell.
Come join me in hell. That's where we're going. Yeah.
I think it's also telling, again, with Jarrett being observant, that he notices that, you know, Lyman looks fine aside from this intangible difference in his eyes. He can tell that something's still wrong.
Yeah.
Oh yes, and then the people on the ship are getting restless and unhappy because Lyman is selling guns to what should be like the enemies of the Europeans, supposedly.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I like this. We have another like way that Dunnett is giving us character details with description, where it's talking about Philippa, and at the end she says she gave up combing her hair, which the salt air had reduced to a kind of scrim of brown Hessian, and laying down proceeded to keep her fingernails short in the way Kate admired least. Then she overslept. So obviously she's biting her nails, and just that, like, that she's so worried about Lyman that.
Yeah, and speaking of Philippa, she's also extremely perceptive, and she's watching Lyman in this, you know, losing his temper, with his harsh tongue, his face contemptuous, his manner insufferable. He had not, she judged, had any sleep. So she sees him acting like a terrible asshole, and instead of thinking like, wow, he's terrible, she's like, oh, he's hasn't slept, right? And then later she tries to like mother him, which doesn't turn out very well.
No.
But at least she's, you know, her heart is really in the right place, and she's very perceptive.
Yeah, and it's a sign of growth in her character too, because, you know, 2 years ago she would have just been that asshole who blah blah blah, you know, and now she's like, oh, he's sleep deprived.
Yeah. So, yeah. Well, and in all these 3 chapters, he doesn't sleep once, so this goes on for couple days, I think. And by the time Leonie Strozzi is there, he still has not slept.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what did you think of Jarrett lying and being like, oh yeah, the baby died too?
It was Jarrett. Like, of course he did. I like that Philippa doesn't necessarily believe him. Like,
well, and for good reason, because the Dame de Dutton did tell her to go to Zakynthos, so she's like, something more is going on here.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's fully entrenched in the prophecy, so.
Yep.
And we end with this moment of they're talking about, to pass over grief. They say the Italian sleeps, the Frenchman sings, the German drinks, the Spaniard laments, and the Englishman goes to plays. What then does the Scot? And Jarrett says, this one kills. Lymond and grief.
I mean, don't piss him off. Like, is that the lesson here?
Well, I think it's interesting because normally, like in the past, when he's been really upset about something, he tends to take it out on himself.
Mm-hmm.
But here, he takes it out in this rage on these people who are basically, they're also pawns of Gabriel, not like deserving of death. I mean, like if they, the ones that attack them and Lyman kills him, like whatever, like they attacked, so okay, fine. But the guy who's like just lying there and not fighting back and Lyman just kills him, that's where it's obviously crossed a moral line.
Yeah.
So in the next bit, the Dauphiné leaves safely. The passengers are pissed off about the guns, and then Lyman reveals that actually the weapons are faulty, so he hasn't really done anything.
He totally sabotaged all of them, which...
The masterful way in which he used those guns to his advantage by trading them away. It's like, oh, but I didn't give them the bullets. And then he does give them the bullets, and they leave safely and soundly, and he's like, oh, they were all defective anyway, except for the one that he fired in the beginning, the only one that worked.
Right. Yeah, and I was also thinking, like, that was a fortune in guns, because if you think about it, was 400 guns, and this was like the most up-to-date gun that hadn't even made it to this part of the world yet. It was so up to date. Like, so those guns had to have cost a fortune. And so it's again a sense of how he's kind of throwing money at this project. He just doesn't care about the cost of what's happening. So
yeah, definitely. I mean, he threw money at St. Mary's, but that had a way of making money back eventually. This, he's definitely just pulling out all the stops. So should we move on to chapter 6, Leonie?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so back on the Dauphiné, Philippa is angsting about what to do, since she thinks that Lyman thinks the baby is dead, but she also has this prophecy from the Dame de Dutton telling her to go to Zakynthos. So she goes and talks to Lyman, who has not slept or ate, and he kind of tells her, actually quite gently, he tells her that she can't come with them and he's sending her home.
Which... good for him. She has no business on this ship. Like, he should have sent her home ages ago.
Dude, he tried. You try sending people home.
I know.
It is really funny how Lyman is this like powerful man in this powerful masculine-driven world, and he can't make these women do anything he wants them to do.
No. Because how much money are we going to put on the fact that Philippa's actually going home? Zero money is going on.
Yeah, she's actually kind of happy about this because she's like, okay, I can go to Zakynthos.
I can go and I can sneak off and go to this other place.
Yeah.
And I love how confident she is that she's absolutely going to get Abernathy to do exactly what she wants. Like, I mean,
she probably is going to get him.
Yeah, I know. There's no doubt in her mind that it's like, oh yeah, I'll just leave and then Abernathy's going to take me to this place. It's just a random place in Greece.
Yeah.
I love it. But
okay, so sorry, just quickly summarize the rest of the chapter, or this section. So then she then comes back a bit later and she's got this sleeping powder to try to help him sleep because she realizes he hasn't slept in so long. She kind of startles him awake, like he seems to have maybe fallen asleep, like standing, reading on the deck. And he's so upset he actually knocks it out of her hand and storms off. And then when he storms off, he realizes there's a ship coming after them, which is the same black corsair ship that they escaped previously. Thoughts on this section?
This is just a note on sort of the action overview. The one thing I think you left out that I think is kind of important is Lyman's plan is now to go to Malta to take care of Gabriel.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
So
Yeah. I love that as Philippa is watching Lyman sort of pace around, and like she's clearly worried about him and wants to help him. So it says she eyed Lyman as he moved about, wishing she were older. So it's like she wishes she was older, and it's like, well, what would you do if you were older, young woman? Too. And then the second thing she wishes is wishing she were a man. So like she's feeling like she can't do the things for Lyman that she wants to do because she's young and she's female. And it says, I'm battling too with a weight on her conscience. And so she's got this struggle about what does she tell him. But I love that she's like, she wishes she was older. And she wishes she was a man.
I mean, as a woman in a patriarchal society, especially when women have so little power, like totally makes sense.
Yeah, 100%.
But no, I mean, she's really awesome in this. Like, she's so observant. She sees what's going on with him. She sees that he needs, he needs some kind of help that he's not getting. She still hasn't quite, she's not old enough to know exactly how to help, but she tries.
Yeah.
They're also, it's interesting, they're both very perceptive in their conversation with each other. She says, he's telling her, Philippa, we can't take you with us, not now. Kate would never forgive me. And she says, you mean now the baby's dead, you don't need me? And he says, Jarrett told you. I see that. Yes, that's partly the reason. So he realizes that Jarrett has lied, and he covers it really well. It's like, yeah, definitely, the baby's dead.
Yeah. And then where she says, if you, talking about Gabriel, she says, if you touch him, you'll lose your own life. And he says, as long as he dies, what does that matter? And then like that, I mean, that idea that he seems to have a death wish when it comes to Gabriel. So Philippa that's not going to go, she's not going to miss that. So I'm interested to see what she does with that information going forward. Like if she knows that he's willing to sacrifice his own life to defeat Gabriel, how is she going to try and thwart that? I don't know.
Well, and not only that, but he's going to kill Gabriel, and he thinks the baby's dead.
Mm-hmm.
So now she's in this race against time, because if Gabriel dies, then the men will kill the baby.
Right.
So she believes that she's in a race against time to save the baby before Lyman kills Gabriel, which is also interesting because Lyman doesn't believe the baby's dead, but he is planning to go after Gabriel. So is he thinking like vengeance is more important than saving the baby?
Mm-hmm. Or does he somehow think that he can interrupt the news in some way, or that he can beat the news to the baby? Because there's no instantaneous news, so somehow the news of Gabriel's death has to reach the men to kill the baby. So does he think he can somehow outsmart that in some way, or I don't know.
It makes me wonder.
Mm-hmm.
He might just be like, hey, listen, Gabriel's gonna die, I'll die too, and then the baby will die, and we'll all be dead, and whatever.
And the world will
Gabriel dies, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Can I just say, I'm still a little suspicious of, is it Onofrian? The tailor guy, the cook / tailor guy. Like, I don't know what's going on with, I still find him a little sketchy.
Why?
I think part of it is he's like random servant who showed up, and I'm like, this reads as sketchy. So I don't know.
I didn't see him as sketchy until you said something. So now it's on my radar, but I still don't necessarily think he's a mole or a traitor. I would need some extra proof or something to happen before I start thinking that.
Yeah. I think it's because of Queen's Play and what's his name? What was the servant's name in Queen's Play?
We talked about it. Peter Dooley.
Yeah, Peter Dooley. I think it's because of Peter Dooley and how I was super confident that Peter Dooley was like a rat in some way. And then the book kept going and going and going and nothing happened and nothing happened and nothing happened. And so finally I was like, oh, okay, I guess he's fine, you know, and then he ended up to be a rat. So I think that's part of what's going on for me. But
I mean, it could also be possible that Lyman, if he is a rat, that Lyman knows he's a rat and brought him on specifically because keep your friends close, your enemies closer.
Yeah. I mean, here is one thought too, because it could be, is it Gautier, that guy? I think somebody in this party is feeding information to Gabriel. Because if I was Gabriel, I mean, like, what's the one thing he could do that would be useful to him would be to plant somebody in the party who is his. So Anafrian seems to be a logical guess, but he also kind of seems to be the obvious guess. So maybe it's not him. But if it is him, it would explain why Lyman allows him to come if he's feeding him information. Like, because then the question becomes, if Gabriel has somebody in their party, does Lyman know who that person is, and is he using that knowledge to feed Gabriel false information?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
I mean, there's a lot of potential suspects, actually. Gautier, Marta, Salablanca, probably not Archie. I mean, it's Archie. But all these...
I don't think it's Archie. I really don't think it's Salablanca.
We all know it's Philippa.
It's not Philippa.
Come on. It's so obvious.
I don't think it's Salablanca. It's definitely not Archie. It's definitely not Philippa. It's not Jarrett. I mean, so Marta maybe, although I would like it if it wasn't her, because I would like her conflict with Lyman to be not just being in the pay of Gabriel. Like, I want her to have a conflict with Lyman that's based on their familial relationship or something like that. I don't want her to be like that kind of bad guy. So I think it's either Gautier, Anafrian. Who else do we have? Like random soldiers?
We've got Foggy, the maid.
Oh, Foggy, the maid.
Although I don't think it would be her.
Yeah, I don't think it's her either.
I still think it's interesting that Salablanca was like taken home to his family and then he just decides to come back with Lyman anyway.
Maybe.
I don't think
yeah. I'm just gonna say no because I don't want it to be him.
No.
I would be super sad if it was him.
That's assuming that there is some sort of mole. We don't know for a fact.
True. Yeah, we don't know if there is one, but I just think it would make a lot of sense if Gabriel had planted somebody. And it would, I feel like it's within his character. I think it's within his ability. And it seems super useful to do that. So
it's also interesting that Philippa comes like this close to telling Lymond about Zakynthos and then suddenly decides not to. Why do you think she almost told him, and why do you think she decided not to?
I think she almost told him because she feels guilty. Like it said earlier, that she's got to, it says, she had a, wait, where was it? There was a weight on her conscience. So I think this information is the weight on her conscience, that she has this information. So, and then maybe she doesn't tell him, I don't know, doesn't want to give him false hope maybe, or?
Well, I think also the Dame du Temps told her to go alone with Archie. So if she was to tell Lymond, either he'd go with her or he'd find some way to stop her from going.
Yeah. Maybe the latter is her fear.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because he totally would. Like, if she said, yeah, the Dame du Temps told me to go to Zakynthos, he'd be like, hell no.
Hell no.
On you.
Yeah.
I'm gonna hire someone to drag you back to your mother and null you out of their sight.
And Philippe is not stupid. Like if Lyman forbids Archie from taking her to that place, then Archie probably wouldn't take her. But if they go off and Archie doesn't have any specific orders against it, then there's the real possibility that she can convince him to go. So
we also have just more hints of what a really bad emotional place Lymond is in. She just finds him skipping dinner outside in the complete darkness, staring down at the water, and he seems to spend hours there.
mm-hmm.
So he's in super like wrecked emotional state here.
Well, also it's worth noting that that's the last place he saw Una was in the water beside a ship. So like looking down at the water beside the ship is, you know.
Oh, it's so sad.
Yeah.
All right, any other thoughts on that section?
There was a nice another little bit. I feel like all I talk about is Philippa. There's another nice little bit where Jarrett's telling Philippa, like, you're gonna regret. Philippa's gonna give him this drugged wine, and Jarrett's like, you're gonna regret it, and so is he. And it says, at 15, Philippa was immune to that kind of adult abjuration. So it's just like this. She's a teenager.
And she's unstoppable. She's like, I am gonna help this guy, and it doesn't work, but she tried her very best.
Nobody can stop me. Yeah.
All right. So then in our next section, who is this boat, Corsair ship, sneaking up on them? Why? It is Leone Strozzi. And he's come for these papers that Lymond is carrying that discredit Gabriel. Because Leone has ambitions of being Grand Master, Gabriel is a rival, so this could help him to become the Grand Master. And they negotiate for these papers with the kind of key point being that Lyman wants him to withdraw his own candidacy because he knows he'd be a pretty bad Grand Master because he's driven by his own like vengeful agendas. And Jarrett kind of interrupts the negotiations and is like, oh, just give it to him. And then like Lyman basically gives up and gives it to him. And he also asked him to take the women away, and Marta refuses. Philippa goes. She does not say goodbye to Lyman because she is led to believe that he's passed out drunk. And then Marta refuses to go, and they have this great conversation where she totally wins and kind of talks some sense into Lyman, both in terms of letting her stay and going to get the baby in Jerba instead of going to Malta to kill Gabriel.
Yep.
So, thoughts on this?
So first of all, I was a bit confused. Is this actually the same ship that attacked them earlier, or did they just think it was the same ship? And if it was actually the same ship, is it Strozzi that attacked them earlier? Because that seems weird.
I don't think he knew it was them on their way to Algiers, but he knows now on the way out.
So he was just attacking some random ship.
That's what I read it as.
Okay.
Maybe he was trying to intercept them before they went to Algiers the first time, but it seemed like they were in a lot more danger of actually getting attacked the first time than this time around.
Right. Okay. I feel like I missed a plot point somewhere.
Because it does say that since Leone, whatever, has left the order, he sort of turned to piracy a little bit.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Yeah, totally. He's a pirate now.
I mean, why not? Let's all just leave the order and become pirates.
What's left for us anyway?
About the same thing.
Let's be pirates.
There's a great point when they see the ship coming for them and they see the 8-pointed cross of Malta and this moment of fear that it could be Gabriel coming for them, but luckily it's not.
Yeah. I was worried about that.
Way too early in the book for Gabriel to show up in person yet.
Yeah. I do love, we talked earlier about Leone's digs at Jarrett but I love this bit on 105 where he says you can see Lyman's face, and Strozzi says, "But that is the one. You hide him from me. It is jealousy, yes? Now I see, my dear Blight, why you have abandoned the order." And laughing under his breath, he embraced Lyman of both cheeks. So I was just like, aha! I get it now. But yeah.
Yeah, he definitely doesn't have any censorship in mind here. He gets away with saying a lot.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, here is one of the things that makes me suspect Onofrian is 106, about a third of the way down, where it says Lyman is talking to Jarrett and Strozzi, and it says he had not asked either the master or Monsieur Gautier to be present, and Onofrian had taken it on himself to serve the three men, half filling their glasses with Malmsey, and refilling attentively. So he just kind of volunteered himself to like serve alcohol to these guys and is doing it. And so I'm like, okay.
Yeah, it's a good spot to get information out of.
He's like listening to the conversation. And
true. I mean, it's also just the sign of a good, lead servant of food.
Yeah.
But yeah, there.
Yeah.
I like Jarrett being perceptive again, always surprising on 104, where he thinks Lyman had not been prepared for this. A physical contingency he could easily handle, but for the other kind of crisis, he needed time. He had not yet come to terms with what had happened yesterday. Philippe's method had not been the right one, but something was becoming necessary, thought Jarrett, to mark the end once and for all of that interminable day. Meaning Lyman still has not slept since that whole day of finding his body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, Jarrett, man, he's improving, just like Philippa. Lyman's got these people on his side now that were not on his side in the previous book.
Yeah. Yeah. I also like Jarrett's description of Strozzi as a friend, but a dangerous friend.
Yeah.
So. Mm-hmm.
And also, I think when Strozzi shows up and he's talking about Lymond, and he remembers this Lymond of Queen's Play, which is so different than the Lymond of now. So he says, a drunken amateur who makes music and love like an angel. And then Jarrett's like, no, you've got the wrong man.
No.
Oh, Jarrett, no.
No more.
No, you just didn't know him back then.
Yeah. But it is really different. Like again, we are not in Queensland anymore. Which is why I find Queen's Play so enjoyable to reread, even though it's not the best on first read, in my opinion, because you get this version of Lyman that's so different from this hard, bitter, cold, controlled version we get later.
Yeah. Yeah. Then we have that negotiation.
And notably, Lyman is not drinking until Strozzi pulls a similar thing as whatever the pirate Thompson guy did, and is like, I don't trust a man who doesn't drink. So Lyman has like one drink or maybe two.
Yeah, there's a moment where he does that. Did I underline it? The moment where he does that, and Jarrett makes this observation. Darn it, I don't think I marked it. Jarrett makes an observation about how the last time Lyman did this was for professional reasons. And it made me think that Jarrett has recast that whole scene in the inn with like Lyman getting drunk and then sleeping with
Jolita.
Thank you, Jolita. As like that, he sort of reimagined that whole scene in his head. That it becomes that he sees Lyman as having less agency in those bad choices because he needed this information from Thompson and all that. But now I can't find the line. So anyway, I don't know if you guys know where it is.
But it is very telling, like Jarrett saying he's really reassessed Lyman in a similar way as Philippa has, and it does cast his previous actions in a better light.
Yeah.
We also get some insight into what Gabriel has been up to, which is, of course, he's putting on a very strong performance in Malta, working like a madman. He scourges himself with vigils and fastings. He spares himself nothing, all this, bull crap.
Sure.
Wait, I did find it. Hold on. It's on 111, where it says, It says, only once in all that time had he, Jarrett, seen him affected by drink, and then his reasons had been strictly professional. What happened afterwards, Jarrett preferred to forget. And then it talks about women, and it says, and as for women, apart from the one brief episode in Baden, he knew of only two. One had been a child of 15, Gabriel's sister. The other, by hearsay only, had been Una O'Dwyer. And each, in its way, had been a single cold-blooded act of expediency. And aloud, Jarrett said, it isn't as monotonous as it sounds. So, like, Jarrett has sort of cast Lyman in this role of like a, I don't know, temperate person who doesn't sleep around. Like, he's got this, he doesn't drink, he doesn't sleep around, he doesn't, you know. So I'm curious to think about like how Jarrett's opinion of Lyman has changed. You know, has he done a complete 180, and is he now going to be obsessed with Lyman as this moral character? I don't know.
I mean, I do think he's mostly right. I mean, Lyman, since Jarrett has known him, has been this evolving from Vervassal Harold, like super opposite of Towdy Boy, very proper and well behaved.
Yeah.
Aside from Baden, which is interesting that he did sleep with this random woman.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I liked Leonie's, you know, being like, is it true? No laughter, no drinking, no love.
Yeah. It's interesting that he doesn't say no music. You know?
I think it's part of it, yeah. And he has turned very grim.
And I like how he suggests that the possible reason of the enmity between Lymond and Gabriel is that they're sort of jilted ex-lovers.
Mm-hmm.
I know.
Yeah.
That gets Jarrett super flustered.
Yeah. Jarrett agrees, like, well, Gabriel might have been trying, but it didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and then he brings up, you know, the Diagnon's pursuit of your friend was notorious. Like, he's like, everybody knows your friend's into guys. It's like, yeah.
Once perhaps Graham Mallet hoped to make of Lymond more than a friend. He knows better now. So if you go back and read Disorderly Nights as Gabriel attempting to seduce Lymond, that reading works.
Yeah.
Of all men, my God could love you, and I too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You just want to see the facial expressions, right? Because like, if this was if Disorderly Nights was a movie, you know, and whoever's playing Gabriel, like, they could amp up that seduction with like various looks based on the dialogue that we have. So
just part of why I find it so entertaining to go back and reread, and also the fact that Jarrett is there in the mix, because I read Jarrett as a repressed gay man who won't admit it to himself. So the fact that he's in this mix between, you know, Lymond and Gabriel, with Gabriel trying to seduce both of them, is just fascinating.
Yeah.
Oh, so what else? So Leonie assumes that the child is a pawn of prestige, meaning like he wants it because Lyman wants the kid because of this, you know, enmity with Gabriel, not because he wants the kid for his own sake, of course. And then he asks if it's because of slighted love. And makes his comment about such a severe masculine aura about the Dauphiné. Even the women, one discovers, are to be put off.
Yep.
And he does also when he's going to take the women, he says, as if they were your mother, your sister, they shall be treated. And Lyman stares at him. So I think we have this, I don't think Leonie even knew, but I think he definitely like accidentally strikes a chord with Lyman when he I guess it's the referring to Marta as a sister.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he's not even seen her, so he wouldn't even know.
Yeah, he wouldn't know.
Yeah.
So.
But it definitely, like, Lyman has a reaction to that, you know, which we kind of get more later when Marta, you know, has that argument with him. Basically, like, we can tell that he's got this intense reaction to seeing her, and he's trying to repress it, but he can't entirely.
Yeah. Yep.
And then also kind of going back to the whole like sort of how the traditional patriarchal view in that society would see what's going on is Leonie's point of view, which is that Lyman going to all this trouble for a nameless bastard who's not the heir. Perhaps your Mr. Crawford is not so stable as we judge. Meaning a man that would go to all this trouble for a child that's not his heir must be unstable.
Must be crazy.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean, he is unstable, but it's not because he wants to rescue his child.
Yeah. Nor is that a symptom. Like, that is not a sign of instability. Yeah.
Okay, so then after that whole sequence, Lyman does drink the one drink, and Jarrett tries to get him to drink another, and he flings it away like he flung away Philippa's drink earlier and says, "I'd rather think one of us drunk is sufficient." And this is where they have this argument about, you know, the fact that Jarrett basically like ruined the negotiations, and that Lyman thinks that Leone Strozzi would be a bad grandmaster because he's in this feud with the Medici. And he will wield the Order of St. John like an assassin's knife for his own private purposes. That doesn't sound much better than Wanda Omedes, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is where he says he's going to follow Strozzi to Malta and get the women out of the way. So he's basically like, forget the baby, I'm going to kill Gabriel. And then interestingly, that's where we have the scene where Philippa says her goodbyes by seeing what seems to be, what she thinks is Lyman pass out on the table. But then we get this reveal that actually it was not Lyman, it was Jarrett, which was foreshadowed when Lyman was saying, like, isn't one of us drunk good enough? Like, Jarrett has been drinking a lot.
Oh, Jarrett.
But also it's interesting that Onofrian is the one that kind of agrees that that it's Lyman who's drunk. So is he misleading Philippa, or is he just also mistaking the situation like she did? The last memory of the Dauphiné she carried away with her was that supposedly Lyman passed out on the table, and of that blow which numbed her arm to the shoulder.
I thought this paragraph was interesting, and it threw me for a second. On 114, sort of 2/3 way down, it says she was glad to go, glad in spite of herself to be spared the society of Marta, and achingly glad to be plucked from the unhappy muddle between herself and her mother's strange friend, Mr. Crawford. So it's interesting that she's thinking of him as her mother's friend. Never again, she had said to herself over and over as she sat shivering in the longboat beside Marta. That was the part that confused me. I was like, Marta isn't in the boat. But then I realized this is a flashback to the last time they were in a boat waiting for the pirate ship. So the longboat beside Marta with the sea lapping around them, waiting for the Corsairs' guns to start firing, and the signal, which was blah, blah, blah. Never again, if she lived to escape from all of this, would she force sympathy or arch female attentions on a man, whatever his seniority. And I have a feeling that is a vow she will not keep.
They were on the boat this time around too. As soon as Lyman saw the boat coming, he ordered the women put on this boat.
Yeah, this isn't the boat that's going to drop them off.
Oh, this is the boat that they were going to escape.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
If they were bad pirates.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah. But yeah, there is always foreshadowing of whenever a character says never again, you're always like, probably never again. Yeah. So then we have Marta's conversation with Lymond. Thoughts on this?
I mean, she's great. I love that, like, you are now doing precisely what Gabriel wants you to do. And she doesn't spare him. She's very blunt. And it's just, you are facing east, and you cannot fight the east with emotion, only with your brain and your soul. And he needed to hear it.
Yeah. Well,
his oath in St. Gabriel's Chapel and the church that he made at the end of the last book, which completely sort of silences Lyman for a moment. He's like, there are not that many people that know of this.
Who knows of it? Like, who is there? I can't remember.
I would think his family
Did everybody in the church hear it, or was it just people standing right beside him?
Well, you wouldn't hear it unless you were close. Because
Yeah,
really
because he was like kneeling at that altar. And I can't remember who was right around him.
Richard, Philippa, maybe Sibylla. I mean, but there were a lot of people in, so someone could have been standing nearby and listening.
Yeah.
She's got a good source of gossip.
Yeah.
Or if Philippa told her, like, this is why Gabriel, I mean, they were alone in the cabin on this ship for a long time. So maybe Philippa said, this is why he's going after his kid. He made a vow.
Maybe.
But yeah, so this is another reason why it feels like, unless this is a double cross in some way, like it feels like Marta would not be in Gabriel's pay either, because she seems to be strongly advocating for him to be smart and thoughtful and not go into a trap and all of that. Whereas unless Gabriel's playing some super twisty long game, which he absolutely could be doing for sure, it seems like maybe she's not on his side.
She also, in this sequence, like, she's giving him a very harsh talking to, but it's like tough love. Like, she's actually really helping him get out of this place he's stuck in emotionally. And she's, again, like Jarrett has somehow become, she's very perceptive. Where she says, what have you learned from life that you cannot face facts? What happened in Algiers that is so paralyzing that your mind cannot work through it? Shall I tell you? And then she talks about what happened to Una. She tells him to acknowledge it, and also to acknowledge that, other people have suffered that too, that she was ill, she did not want to survive, and it was likely she either died by her own hand or was killed before. And the moment of her death was that moment. What happened later was nothing to Una. Right? What dignity did she have that was not of the spirit? So she's actually the first person to kind of straight talk him and comfort him in this intense way, but it is a comfort about, this horrible loss that he suffered.
Yeah. And she does, Jarrett mentioned early in the chapter about how there needed to be an endpoint to this interminable day. And she's giving him the endpoint to the day. She's the one who's sitting there and helping him process, like, this is what happened, face it. It's not you can tell that it's just spinning in his head, and he just can't get out of this track of seeing her body and just is spinning through this. And so she's snapping him out of it. And it is, I think that's a great way to put it, what you said, like, she's showing him tough love. And it's like what's that? Moonstrike's like, snap out of it. And so I don't know. She, at the end of this chapter, she's a much more interesting character to me, because I'm like, what does she really think of Lyman? What are her motivations here?
Well, and how is she able to see through him so clearly, having known him for such a short period of time, actually? Maybe because they're so similar. So then also very telling is she says, your other problem, of course, is myself. You won't solve that either by dismissing me as if I had never existed. You may consider that you are sending me ashore in my own interest, but I put it to you that you are not. I am prepared to risk my life by staying. You must find the manhood to allow me to stay. So she's basically saying, you're acting like you're trying to keep me safe, but actually you're trying to keep yourself safe because you don't want to deal with what I represent.
Yeah. And I love that when she says on the next page where she says, like your son, I'm a bastard. And he replies, forgive me, but I think you are a bastard like nobody else.
Yeah. Well, and this is in response to him just being so like stunned by this conversation. And he says, who are you?
Yeah. Yeah. So.
And then, I mean, it works. It gets through to him. He does finally, like you said, at the end of the day, he does finally go to sleep at the end, and he decides we're going for Jerba, not Malta. So, because she tells him, like, your obligation is to this child. So he's going to go save the kid instead of kill Gabriel. And it's all because of Marta.
Yep. Fascinating.
Yeah. So, any other thoughts on these chapters and what's going to happen next?
Oh, camel trader, you're in trouble.
Yeah. I think we're going to get a split sort of narrative. I think we'll have some chapters follow the Lyman's crew, and then we'll spend some time with Philippa and Archie too.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think we're going to see Philip and Archie go to whatever that Greek place is. It starts with a K. What's it called?
Zakynthos.
It's an island of off of Greece.
Yeah, so they're going to go there. Super interesting. What's on the island? Who knows? And then Lyman et al. Chasing after this camel trader, which I'm hoping Salablanca will have a good sense of what to do. And
so which of these crews is going to find the baby?
I mean, I would think it might be Philippa's crew, because that's what the prophecy said. Like, if you wish to find the baby, you need to go here alone with Archie. So it's pretty specific.
How much do we know? How much was the Sultan interested in Greece? Like, I know that Ottoman Empire like fought Greece like much later in history, like in the 1800s, but I don't remember what was happening in the 1500s. So is this the kind of thing where like Dragut has power on this island? I'm wondering. I don't know what the state of Mediterranean politics was at this time.
Never learned any of that in my history classes. So,
because I mean, one thing that has to happen is we have to see Dragut, right? Like, he can't be an invisible character this whole book. So we've got to meet him at some point. I think it'd be super cool if we met the Sultan, like, because they keep referencing him as like the ultimate power. You know, there's all these sort of there's these guys that are underneath the Sultan, but the Sultan is like the big cheese, if you will.
Enough about him.
Do what?
I said we've certainly mentioned him enough in these chapters.
Yeah, he's been mentioned a lot. So that would be super interesting. Are we going to go herring off across the desert after this baby? Like, is that what's going to happen? I don't know. We shall see.
Yeah.
What's going to happen to Philippa? Or what do you want to happen?
I think she'll ultimately be safe, but she's going to get into some dangerous situations herself.
Yeah. I think she's going to get captured.
Yeah.
I just do. I think there's been too many close calls of like pirates attacking, and now she's going off with just Archie, and I feel like they're gonna get captured. Also, because there's a thing in the characters thing where she has this like page boy that's hers, and so I'm like, at some point she's gonna end up in some like court somewhere in the Middle East or North Africa or something. So I think she's going to get captured, or else, invited to visit, strongly invited or something. Oh, kitty.
Gabriel could definitely use her as leverage against Lyman.
Yeah. So I think she's just so vulnerable. Like, she doesn't think she is, but she is. So I think she's going to get captured.
I wonder if she's going to realize how she really feels towards Lyman, if it's going to come as a realization.
I don't know. I mean, I love that she was thinking of him as her mother's strange friend. Like, and yeah, so that'll be cool. I really want Archie to like shine, be helpful.
He will in his own way, I'm sure.
Yeah. Your cat is so cute.
She wants to be in the video, clearly. My mom was watching these and she was like, I didn't see the cats in your last video.
River or Harlem?
That's River.
Okay. Oh, hi, River.
Harlem is right there, so she's here, but you just don't see her.
They were making little cat purring, snoring noises earlier, and I thought it was so cute.
Cute.
Yeah, I kept muting when I wasn't talking because I could hear them snoring in the background.
They were cute. So Philippe, what do you think? What do you want to happen?
I mean, there's a lot that can happen at this point. I think I don't know if we'll go to Malta or not. I think Lyman may end up skirting around Malta and just like, keep getting clues further and further and being led along this goose chase to find the child when he may not be the one to find him at all. It may be Philippa. So I do think the child will be found. I really hope the child lives for Lyman's sake, but it's not necessary. I don't think,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I really, really would like this book to end with Philippa finding the baby, and or at least being there when the baby's found and being able to, I think I said this last time, like I just want her to be able to fulfill this mission that she sent herself on. Yeah. And of course for Lyman as well, like I want Lyman to have a light at the end of this book, like something happy and something in his life go right. So,
and it seems that they're both parties are sort of headed east. So I guess a logical conclusion is that they'll meet back up in Constantinople in some way or another.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Is that the capital of the Ottoman Empire at the time?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure, maybe.
It is, yes.
Okay.
I don't know what year or what time frame it even changes to Istanbul, but
no, Istanbul is Constantinople.
No, but you don't know when it's named.
Yeah, it already is. It's already Turkish. Yeah.
But it's not Istanbul yet. It won't be Istanbul until like the 19th century.
Yeah.
Right?
It's Constantinople at the moment.
It's Constantinople, right?
I think so.
It's Istanbul, but people still call it Constantinople because it's that long ago.
Okay.
So, yeah. Well, I my history in that part of the world is woefully underrepresented, unfortunately.
Mine is woefully inadequate.
The first time I went to Istanbul was with a Lymond fan group, and we went to a bunch of interesting places, but one of them was this like sort of like circular exhibit of this siege where the Turks took Istanbul from the it was like the Byzantine Empire, which was called the Eastern Roman Empire at the time. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so I have very vivid memories of like spending an hour in this like circular thing, just watching like it's the same scenes that just go around over and over, which is like attacking the walls and swords and knights and stuff. And it was in the 1400s, like 14.
Oh, okay.
Mid 1400s, yeah.
Okay.
But you'll have pictures for if we do go there, yes, to share.
I do have lots of pictures, yes, because we went many places. It was a lot of fun.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, one thing to think about is if Gabriel is planning out this whole thing, Philippa is a variable that he has probably not thought about, because how would anyone who wasn't in the room with the Dame de Dutons know that she's going to go to Zakynthos?
Mm-hmm. And she's a fun unknown variable, like, and she's thwarted his plans before, like, because her running up to St. Mary's was part of thwarting his plans the last time. So
yes, that's right.
So Gabriel has no reason to be charitable towards her at all. So
there's another thing that I hope comes back in the chapter where they both sort of visited the Dame de Dutons. Mm-hmm. There was that other character that sort of just showed up and disappeared, the Kiaya Khatun.
Oh, that's right.
I don't think that's just a one-off thing. I would assume that she'll be back.
Right. That is a plate that is spinning in the air.
Yeah.
That we do not know. That is true.
She seemed, there was something about, not on my, I forget the exact line, I'd have to look, but it's just like, it's on my whim that you'll get what you're looking for or something. Mm-hmm. So like, this is a mystery, and I'm interested in learning more about her. So hopefully she does show back up.
I do love a good ambiguous character.
Powerful, mysterious, possibly magical ladies.
Yeah. And like, I don't think we really know for sure, like, is the Dame de Dutons, is she like a good character or a bad character. Like, I mean, you know, is she helpful? You sort of, is she like helpful only for her own reasons? Does she have a hidden agenda? Like,
Yeah. Or she just could be true neutral.
yeah.
Often it
Is
is.
she true neutral? Is she chaotic neutral?
I mean,
Chaotic evil. Like
Oh.
Gabriel.
she definitely presents herself as like a force of nature, sort of like neutral, you know, like the fates.
Yeah.
Whether that's the truth, we don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right. Any other thoughts you want to share or things you hope for?
It was very hard for me not to read ahead this time. Like it's the certain segments we've gone over in the past, I've been like, I want to read ahead. I want to find out what happens next, but I've got to wait till we, you know, have our meeting here.
Yeah.
So, I mean, especially since I finished this a couple days ago. So,
yeah, this is one of the reasons I always read the chapters the day that we film these, because I'm afraid of that very thing. Like if I read it a couple days before, I'm going to want to read ahead. So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how you guys are putting up with this because I definitely was just like compulsively, like I think I read the whole series in a couple weeks.
It's so hard. But it's also super fun to do it this way. So there's a reward.
Better discussions because like we've got these small chunks where we can suppose things and try and figure things out without knowing what happens next. So
yeah, it's super fun to do it this way, but it is hard not to read ahead.
Well, I think because this book in particular is like a quest narrative, so you're very set up to like, oh my god, what's gonna happen next? Are they ever gonna find the baby?
True. And so many of the end of the chapters are just like, oh, what? You know, like if we had ended this section on the chapter where like her eyes were straw, and if we had to stop there, I don't know if I could have. Like,
this is a good point. Yes, I'll have to keep this in mind when I think about how to divvy up the chapter.
Yeah. So, well, it was good.
Yes, thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you next time.
yeah.
Bye.